I think this is so unique about science fiction. It's not science or fiction, it's something in between. The space, the tension, the punctuation between two works.
I'm Jane McConnell, and welcome to Imaginize.World, where we talk with forward thinkers, pioneering organizations, and writers of speculative fiction. We explore emerging trends, technologies, world-changing ideas, and above all, share our journeys, challenges, and successes. Chen Qiufan, also known as Stanley Chen, is a Chinese author, columnist, and scriptwriter. His work has been recognized far beyond China. When I met him, one of the most important questions I asked him is, how can we bring about change? And his answer is often it's through storytelling. And he is a powerful storyteller. You can discover his body of work on his website in the show notes. But one I do need to talk about with you here is Waste Tide, a phenomenal novel he wrote in 2013, translated into English, 6 years later in 2019. Some people call it a sci-fi thriller. It's actually a very broad and very deep story, if you can call it that, that explores environmental issues, impact on society, what he calls the invisible people, personal development, social behaviors, life and death, and more. One reviewer I saw called it the pinnacle of near future science fiction writing. He also co authored AI 2041 10 Visions for Our Future with Dr. Kai-Fu Lee. It was named the best book of the year by the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the Financial Times. And something that really surprised me and pleased me is to learn that it won the German Best Business Book Prize of the year. That's because his subject is not really science fiction as we think of it. Stanley has won many prizes. He's been invited to participate in a variety of university and global initiatives focused on humanities, including at DePaul and Yale. Way too many to cite here. I encourage you to check out his website in the show notes. Now, I'd like to take a step back before we go into conversation and ask the question of why is science fiction essential? Stan has a fantastic quote I'm going to read to you. He says, by imagining the future through science fiction, we can even step in, make change, and actively play a role in shaping our reality. In other words, with every future we wish to create, we must first learn to imagine it. You imagine it, and then you create it. Very powerful. Stan's looking for a new term to replace the label of science fiction because he feels he's writing in the space, sort of a triangle between science, technology, and humanity, connecting the past and the future. He was one of the speakers at the annual Paris Peace Forum, which is an event organized by a French nonprofit organization. It brings together heads of state, leaders of international organizations and companies, and civil society organizations. Their goal is to create collective, action oriented initiatives on global governance. Knowing that I lived in France, Stan suggested we meet up in Paris after the forum and have our podcast conversation face to face. That's exactly what we did, and that's what I'm sharing with you now. Join us in Paris. Well, Stanley, it's just amazing to be face to face with you here in Paris.
Thank you for having me, Jane.
I never thought this would happen. Once you agreed to be interviewed, I figured we'd arrange it, we'd do it long distance. And then when you said you were in France and better still in Paris, and you suggested we meet in Paris, and that's great.
Yeah. And actually it's quite close.
Yes, it is actually.
Yeah.
Now, the first question I want to ask you is, how would you describe yourself? I don't feel like you're a science fiction writer as such. And when I look at what you've written, what you've done, you seem to be in a different dimension than what most people perceive science fiction to be.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought this up, and because during the previous, I think 2 or 3 years, I've been reflecting about this term science fiction writer and science fiction basically. And I think of course, I started as a sci-fi fans from all of those, classic Asimov, Heinlein, Clarke stories, and Star Wars, Star Trek, and it's all very scientific, in a way. And in China, we put it in an even more scientific way. It has to be very rigorous about science and based on facts and knowledge we've known, and it's written in the textbook maybe. So, but now it feels to me like what I try to do is something more than that, like something across the boundaries, something interdisciplinary, something even about spirituality and mysticism. And because I think science fiction, in a way, is the modern myth. So it try to explain the world in a different way, in a scientific and technological way. But I think that's not enough. So because there are so much we don't know about ahead of us.
Yes.
So like during all this conversation and journey and exploration with scientists, thinkers, philosophers, and artists around the world. So I think basically we need to build up some new narratives, so which couldn't be captured in a very narrow perspective of science fiction. So I didn't have a new term for it yet, but I try to use my writing, my story to expand, the concept of science fiction. Maybe I'll call it something later, but now it's kind of difficult to get rid of that label because the publishers, the marketing people. If you started from writing science fiction, because that's how people categorize you.
Yes.
And they gonna put this label of genre on your books and put on a specific place on the shelves.
Yes.
And it's easy to sell, but I think it's quite a limit, like what you're doing, right? So, and then what you're thinking about. So this is what I try to tell myself. You are basically storyteller. Yeah, storyteller and messenger. You deliver some message in the format of story, no matter in whatsoever medium. Like could be text, could be visual, could be something else, maybe interactive game, even more. So I don't know. So, but it's all about story.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask you what makes science fiction unique from other forms of writing. And in fact, what you're saying is that you're trying to already change the definition of science fiction to be even, how would I say it, greater than the perception of science fiction today.
Yeah, because right now we have the new term like speculative fiction for quite a few years, and even people are not quite clear about what it actually means, because it seems to be very inclusive. Like you can put in a lot of different genres, like maybe like fantasy, slipstream, or even magical realism, or can put into this blanket. But I think it's what is so unique about science fiction is it's interconnected different discourses, like from the scientific and technological perspective, but also from the humanity perspective. And it's something between fictional and reality. And it's something about the past and the future, because we talk about all the things happen in outer space or like otherworldly, but basically we're reflecting the present, the human condition right now. So this is something, flexibility, fluidity across the borderlines. I think this is so unique about science fiction. It's not science or fiction, it's something in between, the space, the tension, the punctuation between two works.
I wonder what you would say are the things from the past that are very important for us now and in the future, because we tend to be, we as sort of a global group of people, we tend to focus so much on the future.
Yeah.
And we forget the past. Do you think there are certain things in the past that we need to think more about?
Of course. You know, people, human, were basically like species with pattern recognition. We see patterns in a totally chaotic message, data, right? We try to seek for a certain kind of pattern, and we abstract all these patterns and use it to predict the future. So this is what humans do, and also machines do the same thing. So without thinking about the past, the history, basically you couldn't do anything about predicting the future. And all these things happen in the past basically decided how you look into the future. Yeah, so I think like science fiction, like speaking of like Handmaid's Tale, 1984, Brave New World, which was written many decades ago.
Yes.
But basically it's talking about like also history, present, but also the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a space-time continuum.
Yes. You have a quote, I have a quote from you about science fiction, which I think is a very powerful quote. And you say, with science fiction, I can probe real life issues through an imaginary narrative. And this is the interesting part, without explicitly arguing who is right or wrong, good or evil. I find that a challenging statement because you seem to be suggesting that we cannot determine right and wrong. Or perhaps you mean that it's up to each individual?
Yeah.
What is your idea?
Yeah. For instance, like in Waist Tide, so basically you can see this kind of very objective description of different classes, different interest party. They all have their justify statement, right? So they all think they're doing the right thing about the world, about the rest of the people. And I think this is reality, right? So it's different layers. If you see things from different angle, basically you see different side facet of reality, and you have your own explanation and justification. So I think with science fiction or with my writing, I try to bring in this kind of multi-layer and diversity of reality. And I don't want to like making all this judgment instead of the readers themselves.
I was just going to say, you're putting a big burden on the reader.
Yes, that might be a burden. So
a good burden, but I mean, it is someone who reads you seriously will feel obliged to think about it.
Yeah, it's not only like cognitively or like intellectually, have to think about it, but also emotionally.
Oh yeah,
you have to feel with it. You have to compassion, empathy, all these things. You should feel what the characters feel, right, about the world.
You achieved that really well.
Thank you so much.
I mean, certain characters in, for example, AI 2041, I'll never forget. They are very, very, not necessarily strong characters, but the emotional side, the human side, I think it's even stronger than the AI side. In fact, if I hadn't known the title of the book, it wouldn't have crossed my mind that AI would be part of the title of the book. It was more about humans, lives, the future.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Lee, he's in charge of the AI part, so he's the expert. So what I try to do is bring in as much as I could human factors. I think that's relevant. And all this autonomy, agency is something could make the differences.
Yes, well, you've certainly done that very well. I think that's why people are attracted to listening to you and why you get invited to different places, because you're bringing something. Well, you talked about transmitting a message, but you're bringing something that's so far beyond science fiction, beyond AI, and I think you have a way of speaking to people on our level. You don't come across as a scientist or a literary person, but a humanist.
I try my best.
Yeah, well, you're doing it very successfully.
Thank you.
Now, I read about a book that I couldn't read because I don't read Chinese, and it's called Algorithms for Life.
Yes.
And you've marked that it's co-authored by AI.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
I mean, like, it was before ChatGPT, and
Yes.
that was back in 2017 when I started to write this book, and it's 6 short stories and a novella about like human AI relationship. So I've been thinking about why shouldn't I have an AI to collaborate with me, and because I used to work for Google, so I have all these engineer friends and who also sci-fi fans. So I invited him, Mr. Wang Yonggang. He's the president of like Sinoventure AI Research Institute. So he said, okay, let's build a thing. So back then there was no ChatGPT. That was the year when Google launched Transformer, the model, the infrastructure of ChatGPT and everything right now. And basically, we're just using some open source codes from GitHub and build a very preliminary model and fed it with all my writing materials. Basically, it's very small amount of data sets. So what it could like generate is basically very simple and sometimes chaotic, sometimes nonsense, avant-garde style, murmuring. So you have to build something around that to make it, sensible for the readers. And that's how I started to think about the whole experiments about writing. And surprisingly, it even won me an award.
I saw that.
Yeah, jury by another AI. It's totally.
Oh, that's right. There was an AI jury.
Yeah, so it's totally different AI built up by different teams and using different language, I suppose. And the criteria of their judgment is like the balance of the structure. They're giving a curve and a score to each story, all written by very established writers in China, like published on very famous literature magazines. Like there are thousands of this kind of story, so they giving a score to each one. So at the very beginning, like Mr. Mo Yan, the Nobel Prize winner on literature,
yes.
he got the highest score. So everyone thought, oh, this AI jury works very well. Like Mr. Mo Yan, what could be wrong, right? So he's the best. But at the final day, so when another magazine in Shanghai, the Fiction World, which I published my story, and they submitted all their, bunch of materials to the AI jury. And surprisingly, my story, The State of Trance, got the highest score.
Higher than the
Mr. Mo Yan. So I'm the first place. Yeah, so that's my lifetime experience to be the Nobel Prize winner.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
That's
That's fantastic. Yeah,
it's a big deal.
Yeah, but somehow one AI recognized some stories co-written with another AI is the best story among thousands of stories, human stories. So this is so surreal and so science fictional, and I think that's the moment I start to think about, oh, maybe we're already in this, transition towards a more, alienated future, no matter on creative writing or whatsoever. So we're already in there. But
you say alienated. Is that right?
Yeah, alienated.
Alienated
from the world we used to know about, writing, because we used to think that creative writing or these artistic forms, is all belong to human.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no way machine can replace us because maybe they can do a lot of other things, but not this. But it's changing. It's changing in a very strange way.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was one of the industries I wanted to ask you. Oh, the story you wrote, My Haunting Idol.
Yes.
And at the end, I mean, without going into detail about the story, she is hired to help work with the man, the haunting idol.
Yeah.
And you say, or someone in the book says, in the story says, writers and editors have a knack for telling stories that can touch hearts. And they wanted her because they needed something that was human to touch hearts.
Yes.
So they're saying that AI writing cannot touch hearts. Or did I get that right?
You get it totally right. And I think, of course, from a very humanistic perspective, yeah, that's for sure. But now I'm not 100% convincing that machine couldn't touch the human hearts, because in China recently, there's a project under developing by big tech companies. They're using AI for psychological therapy. Yeah, so they're using AI therapist for those depressive and suicidal patients, and they found it surprisingly good.
Really?
And accurate on the result, like on speculating their mental status and intervene with their interaction through the conversation, basically, and maybe prevent them from committing suicide. So they found it doing a very good job, even better than human therapist. So I think this is definitely something might happen in the near future.
Maybe people felt less threatened.
Yeah, I think.
And not going to be judged by another human.
Of course.
And so they could answer questions more honestly. Maybe they felt, maybe they felt like they were talking with themselves.
Yeah.
Because the people knew it was an AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
They knew it.
Yeah, without being judged, without biased.
Yeah.
And yeah, because sometimes people have this kind of interesting chemistry, right? So you just don't feel easy when you having another person in the room. So I mean, yeah, I definitely believe that AI, at a certain point, they can touch the human heart in a very different approach. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my questions was to talk about a few different industries where you think AI can have a benefit and can also potentially do harm. And one of them was healthcare.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've touched on that. What about the insurance business? The insurance business is already a questionable business.
Yeah, of course.
We see what's happening in the United States now with the different climate change problems and the rising waters, and how some insurance companies are literally leaving states like Florida or California because they can't take the financial risk. How can AI make insurance better? Or can it?
I mean, definitely AI can do the jobs of collecting data, analysis, strategies, and decision makings in a more, in a more like capable way than human. But I think the fundamental problem here is the nature of capitalism. So because they try to maximize the profits and avoid any risk and potential risk. So that means they'll pull out of some certain area, some certain markets if they foresee the risk might happen, like the war or like climate change or whatsoever. So, but this is not decided by technology, not by AI. So I mean, unless we have rebuilt the whole system and governance by AI. So that means the whole insurance infrastructure and redistribution systems are basically designed by AI. Could be, in the far future.
That's not in 2041.
No, definitely no. So
now your story, The Golden Elephant.
Yes.
That's very interesting because their AI is encouraging people to live more healthily. And so that's a benefit. And yet, on the other hand, it's keeping people from doing, well, in the case of the heroine in The Golden Elephant, for being with the man that she loves.
I mean, there are so many layers about
Yes.
human behaviors and social interaction. So it's very complex to doing the math, right? To calculating all these benefits, harms in a very balancing way.
Yeah.
So it depends on how we design the AI, the algorithm.
Well, that comes down to humans, doesn't it?
Yes.
How humans did behind the algorithm.
Yes. At the end of the day, the insurance company behind the scene, right? They
Yeah.
decided which part we should like brought up the weight a little bit is all about the configuration. So all these parameters, we have to just adjust a little bit of this, adjust a little bit of that, but they have the whole picture. They see the whole picture and they can make it profitable. And that's what important to them.
For the insurance company.
Yeah, but each individual basically in this whole picture is just be, reduced to a profile, a data.
Yes.
Yeah, so they just don't care about the dignity, the free will, all these feelings and actualization as a person. So this is what something I didn't see it could be changed by technology or the system.
Because that's the people at the top of the system, of the healthcare system, who are determining how AI is going to function, what the algorithms are.
Right.
So those people need to change.
Of course.
That's what you meant by capitalism.
Yes.
Their interest is money.
Yes. Yes, this, capital-led culture and mindset is fundamental, right? So that's why I put it in the story, like basically it's the new kind of like caste system and amplifier by AI. So it's getting even worse because everything is so invisible, but it's functioning so well and so deeply in our social structure. At the end of the story, the intouchable boy,
Yes.
Sahe. So he had this big dream about he really wants to change the whole thing. Started from being a humanistic engineer, right? He can do the coding, but also he understand all this inequality of the society, and he can like have all these compassions to the people. So this is what we need, like beyond the.
And the end of the story, we don't know what's going to happen.
I don't know.
That bothered me. I would have I would have liked you to give us an answer, an end, but you didn't.
No. I mean, the hope is within our hands, but it's all like decided by the collective effort made by everyone. So if we can create all this consensus as big enough, then maybe we can make the change.
Yeah.
But the problem is, the structure is very imbalanced.
Yeah, I want to get into that a little bit later in another question. But just one more industry I'd like to look at, and that's the industry of education.
Yeah.
And your story, Twin Sparrows, was amazing. And there we saw how education can turn kids in just competing with each other rather than giving them the true desire to be creative, to learn, to explore.
Yeah.
How do you foresee that developing, the field of education with AI?
Yeah. I mean, because I was born and raised in China, a very typical, over competitive society in the education system. Basically, that's what you do. That's what you've been taught.
You're taught to compete.
Of course, since kindergarten, you have to be, work harder and you're getting better score than anyone else in the class. And this is our mindset. But I think it's very toxicated and is basically, I think is not leading us to any brighter future. And of course, Chinese parents, they're, so caring and maybe sometimes too caring about the future of their kids. And they try to give them the best educational resources. And that's why they bought this house, apartment in better location, closer to, more privileged schools, and try to get into the best class because they share the best teachers whatsoever. Curriculums is different. But I think at the end of the day, it's still, it's so unequal because each kid is different.
Yeah.
Each kid, their talent, their learning pattern, their interest, their personality, everything is so different, so unique. So if you couldn't design like curriculum and customize everything you read, you learn, you play by individually, so basically it's not equal. So I think AI could do the thing in the future, and it can help each kid to fully actualize what they want to learn, who they want to become.
AI would ask them questions or?
Yeah. So basically, this is like a companion, like co-living with them all the time. So then like constantly learn through interaction. So it's basically understand better than their parents for each kids. Yeah. So I think, of course, the biggest obstacle here is the educational institution. So this is so conventional. It's very difficult to be changed. Talking about China, because so many interest party related to the educational industry. So basically, it just they don't want to share any piece of cake here. But when we talk about AI, it's revolutionize the thing. So maybe we don't need teacher, maybe we don't need school, maybe we don't need class in the future. But that means it's totally rebuild another educational industry.
I know in the United States, I've talked to some people recently who belong to groups that I belong to online, and apparently they're having trouble finding teachers in America. Teachers are feeling frustrated about the educational system, and they don't want to continue their careers. I think they don't feel free enough to do what they want to do. And there's the big movement about books that are being banned in the United States. And so a number of people feel like they don't want to be part of the educational system. You can understand that.
Yeah, this is so frustrated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, not the exactly same issue in China, but similar. Yeah, because the kids couldn't, select it as freely as they love on the books, on the class, on the curriculums, on the teacher. Of course, they just be assigned to a certain kind of class, books, textbooks, and exam is mandatory. So basically, we've been taught like there's standard answers to each questions. That means there are options. There are like kind of like a pattern or a stereotype of like answering like certain kind of questions. So you have to hit each spot, like sweet spot, and get the score. And that's how we've been trained since kid. I think it's basically just ruining our imagination, and it's not innovated anyways. So this is how we got suffocated like on creativity.
Yeah, I think in America that's what's happening. The second sort of big picture thing I'd like to look at with you is purpose in life, a sense of worth. A lot of people are losing their sense of purpose. Young people, I'm thinking now mainly in Europe and in the United States, are looking for jobs where they can sense the company has a purpose that's compatible with their own sense of purpose, and they can't always find that. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's the core issue right now, not only on the young people, but on the modern society. Like we're losing our purpose, or we like replace our personal purpose with the corporate or national purpose. I think it feels like the biggest crisis. Like mentality crisis and spiritual crisis here. It's about the purpose of living.
Yeah.
Right.
The purpose of living.
Yeah.
You used a word that you say is being used in China now more, involution, instead of evolution, turning inwards. So you said involution is used quite often, or you use it quite often.
Yeah. It's a term brought up by the anthropologist, Professor Xiang Biao. So, and it becomes so popular in China because it perfectly described the status, how the people feel right now. So it's like overly competed, like even like you are like self criticizing because you're not doing good enough. You fail the competition anyways. Is this kind of exhausting process, like recursively self-blame, and is draining you, your energy, your creativity, your passion for living. So basically nobody want to do anything, just lying flat. So that's also the term.
Lying flat.
Yeah, lying flat. So basically doing nothing, passively resisting, not getting married, not in real relationship, not buying things, not working. So that basically means.
I was thinking of the quiet quitting that they talk about. But quiet quitting tends to be related just to the job, not to not getting married or not having a private life. But the whole quiet quitting is just doing whatever the minimum is that to keep the job.
Yeah. I think this is even worse, like young people losing their passion on everything.
Yeah.
So they don't have interest to do anything. Like even, I mean, when I was a teenager, you have a lot of interest and curiosity on many things. Even you were forbidden to get in touch with those things, right? Sometimes, but you always have this kind of enthusiasm to have a look at it or try it or whatsoever. But now it seems like they don't have it. I try to ask, because I've been invited to many universities, maybe high schools, or to talk to the young people and ask them what you really love to do, what you're really interested in. But they try very hard to come up with an answer.
Oh, really?
But ultimately, they came up with a blank face.
Really?
Yeah, so that's totally shocking to me, because I couldn't imagine people like that could find their real passion on doing anything can make the change to our future. So this is, I think, of course, I'll write a lot of things in the story. Maybe some people will read it. Maybe some people might feel, okay, this is encouraging and inspiring, and they start to think about it. And maybe at a certain point, they find a real interest and passion.
You wrote a book that I asked you about because I wanted to read it. The net zero.
Yes.
It was Net Zero in China. Was that the full name?
Net Zero China.
Net Zero China. Yeah. I thought it sounded fascinating. And I couldn't find a copy of it anywhere. Yeah. And you told me it was not Chinese. First of all, it was only in Chinese. Yes. And secondly, it was written for children.
Yes.
I find that an amazing thing.
Yeah, it was published last year. So it's for kids around 9 to 12, maybe a little bit younger or older. So because I think this is the crucial age for, develop your curiosity on everything. So because back in my age, by then, that's how I started with science fiction and everything. So I think this is so important to help them to understand what is climate change, what is the correlation with carbon neutrality, and how we're going to achieve that by changing our, technology and society and even individual behavior like consumption and lifestyle, etc., and try to bring all of this to connect with some philosophical thinking like Taoism in a harmonious way. So I'm happy that the book got received very well. So,
I was just going to ask you what the reaction was.
A lot of primary school So they have the kids to read the book and write some reviews on it, even like short stories, and even they create some illustration about the book and they send it to me. And I read like a lot of reviews. And I was so encouraged that we still have some hope, because the kids, they're still, they love to learn more about it, and they start to think about it and what is future society should look like and how to construct it, and what we should do starting from now on. And I think, yeah, so this is something I feel I have to do it, and I will do it more in the future.
Good.
So
Yes.
so to bring in more, maybe technology, maybe real issues, but in a way that children are easy to access and to comprehend what is going on out there, and in a funny way, of course.
I think that's fantastic. I would hope that that your book or others like it would be translated into English.
I hope, yeah.
Because I think your message goes way beyond China.
Yeah, I think maybe we need to change the title a little bit.
Oh, well, yes. Net zero in the world, maybe?
Yeah. Or net zero game. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Net zero game.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the reaction of the children could interest and stimulate other children.
Yes.
If they see what they've drawn and what they've said, you could start a whole movement.
Yeah. And I have some Zoom call with the kids. Like online, they will ask, because that was back in the lockdown time, so everyone taking the class
Yes.
from their own place, from their home.
From home, yes.
Yeah. So it's so funny that seeing all these kids' face on the screen and in different rooms, and sharing the understandings of the book and talking about the future of climate change and everything. It feels so surreal. Yeah, in a way, like
you may have started something really big.
I hope. Yeah, because I mean, they are the generation who will live through the whole transition. If they couldn't understand it fully, that how can we expect the change could happen, right?
Yeah, it makes me think on sort of a different angle about the story you wrote called The Job Savior.
Yeah.
And the whole idea there is that it's more people get a sense of value because they have something to do from 8 to 5. It doesn't matter much what the job is.
Yes.
Is that their sense of purpose and value in life is that they have a job.
Yeah.
That's sad, isn't it?
I mean, different people, they have different read into the story. Some might find it very dystopic, but some might find it, oh, this is some kind of future I want, because they don't need to do the real thing but still get paid, right? So I mean, yeah, it is sad at a certain point because people are not doing the real job. But at a certain point, I feel like this is something might definitely happen, because as David Graeber put it, bullshit job.
Yes.
It's basically here. It's basically everywhere.
It is here now.
So we just put it, push it to a little bit further, like designed by AI, driven by XR.
Yes.
So, but still, it's the system here. So
it's a logical outcome the way you pushed it just a little bit further.
So people talking about maybe 20% of the population, they can afford the whole country because all the fortune they're making is basically enough. So what about the rest of the people? What should they do? Like universal basic income, but that's not solving all the problem, right?
No, it doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah. So people need purpose. Again, dignity.
Yes. Getting back to purpose.
Yes.
That's going to be seems to me it's going to be a fundamental problem in years to come, what the purpose is.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are many different dimensions of purpose. Of course, secular one, of course, financial ones, of course, social class ones. But I mean, like Maslow developed his theories at his later years with this kind of transcendental.
Yes. Is the taking of Maslow's pyramid?
Yes.
Yes.
He put another.
The top level was
self-actualization.
Yeah.
But at his later year, he put another hierarchy.
Did he? Self-actualization is the
on
last
the top
one
of
ahead.
that. Yeah, on the
he
top.
Did on top, above that.
Is called transcendental psychology something.
In other words, it's beyond the self.
Yes, and it's very spiritual. It's about connected to the universe or something even more transcendental. It's about talking to the God or something like that.
I wasn't aware of that level. I knew the 5, but I wasn't aware of the 6.
That was in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah, so this is something not very well known.
Yeah.
But it's real. So because, I don't know. And I find it very interesting because this is universally exists among all these different kind of religions around the world. So it's all about reconnect to the one, no matter how you define the one. It's the universe, it's the God, it's the Buddha, of course, there are many different ways to define it, the one. But it's always about how you finding this belonging, ultimate purpose of reunited with something. So it's religious.
Yes.
It's personal.
Yes.
And it's something, I don't know. It feels to me like maybe we need that. It's more spiritual.
But you know what's interesting, Stan, is that he starts at the lower levels.
Yes.
Of you have to have food and drink.
Yeah.
Physical safety.
Yeah.
And social connections.
Yeah.
My understanding of it is you can't start at the top.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to build up
to
what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe people can go in at the highest level without having that safety and the food. And,
I don't think so. It's just like the process of evolution. You have to build up like from the base, from the basement, and top upon that, and reach the top. Maybe some people just couldn't reach the top. Like
you talk about that in the Isle of Happiness.
Yes.
That's a very interesting story.
Yeah.
What is happiness?
Yes.
It's reaching the top level. And how do you reach the top level?
Yeah.
It seems to me in this story, you start at the bottom and you work your way up.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a very subjective feeling of happiness. And even like the definition of happiness is so complex in different culture contexts, right? So even in translation in Chinese, happiness can be translated into different characters.
Different words?
Yes, different words. So like 快乐 is happiness, but it means very instant reaction at the moment. But there's another translation, 幸福 is more long term, is more constant and stabilizing experience. And I think it's within a structure, like a family structure, relationship structure, or like a social structure. So basically, when the government talking about 幸福, it's basically on that level. It's a very stable and prosperity status of living. And it's co-living. It means everyone finds its own position in the society. And it's very satisfying. So this is a very Confucianism understanding of happiness. But if in Taoism philosophy, it's totally different. It means you don't need anything to be happy. You yourself, your existence is happiness. If you realize it, basically you just have the ultimate and unlimited happiness of your life, and you don't need anything else. So this is very diverse understanding of happiness.
Yes, I didn't realize there were that many different definitions.
In our culture. So there are many so different approaches to happiness, but I put it in Middle East because it's rich and I set up this character as a Russian.
Yes, a
you know.
Russian. It was on Qatar.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is something delivery to set up because they are all kind of like a symbolic representation of certain kind of understanding of happiness.
Yeah, it was all the rich people that had gathered together.
Yeah. Because this is something maybe in a secular way we all have the common sense that, or maybe all of those richer people, privileged people, they might be happier than us. We have this kind of speculation. I don't know, in China, maybe not in the rest of the world, but in China, people have that kind of feeling. Yeah, it's a very, pragmatic understanding.
It makes sense to have different words for this.
Yeah, of course.
Because the word happiness is just, I would say, very almost short-sighted.
Yes.
As a word.
Yes.
You tend to think you smile, you're happy, and you don't think of, in our culture, in the Western culture, you don't really think about it beyond that.
Yeah.
And so when you get into different religions, it's different.
It's totally different. Yeah.
One of my questions for you is, can individuals make a difference in the world? And the example I wanted to talk about was Mimi in Waste Time.
Yeah.
Amazing. Mimi 0 and Mimi 1.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you, why not? I thought Mimi 1 and Mimi 2. But there's a reason you have Mimi 0 and Mimi 1.
Yeah. Of course, the binary, the coding.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, that's obvious. But another thing I've been thinking about, again, Taoism, is from 0 to 1, from none to being. So this is something transcendental. And again, this kind of, capitalistic schizophrenia is something divided the people, the personality into two.
Yes.
And how we can integrate ourselves.
That's what I was thinking when I was reading it, and of course the different things that happens to her throughout the story. It's like two parts of the same person. Yeah. And the two parts are talking to each other. Yeah. And it made me think, don't we all have that?
Yeah, of course.
You think we do?
Yes. Always. Yeah. And this kind of conversational process is part of our consciousness, maybe our intelligence. Yeah. So you have to develop this kind of self-observation and self-reflection. Then you can recursively come back to yourself and you can grow. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Waste Tide is such an amazing work.
Thank you.
That I don't even think we can talk about it because it's, no, I'm only partially joking, but it's just so, it's deep, it's wide, it's very layered. Yeah. It's very layered like this and it's layered like this. I would say it's layered in all directions. Yeah. You wrote it, if I have it correctly, in 2003 in Chinese.
2013.
13, okay, in Chinese. Yes. And then it was translated into English a little later.
Yeah. Yeah. 2019, yeah.
Oh, not, okay, 6 years.
6 years, yeah.
Yes. I think it would be quite a job to do the translation.
Yeah, it took a while.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just an amazing, it's a book that I think everybody should read. There are parts of it that are hard to read. I mean, just emotionally hard to read. But it's the kind of book that you can't put down. I'd like to move on to another topic that has to do with globalization. That's something you've talked about. Globalization, you believe we cannot achieve it without consensus. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I've worked with a lot of global organizations, and they're always trying to achieve consensus in the way they do their digital workplace and the way they do their communication strategy, always trying to achieve consensus. They never can. Yeah. And I remember I worked with an agency in Switzerland, the Human Refugees Agency for the UN, and they had blocked everything on their digital workplace because they couldn't reach consensus on how to organize certain things.
Right.
And I was able, working with them, to get them to agree to have one person make the decisions if that person consulted with every person who would be involved by those decisions. No.
bureaucracy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's not really a consensus, but for them, it was the only way they could break out of this blockage they had.
Mm-hmm.
And so they agreed, they put someone in charge and so on. So,
yeah.
But yeah, bureaucracy. How can you achieve consensus?
I mean,
can we?
In the current institutionalization, I don't think it's possible. Yeah. I mean, right now, you know, for example, the Peace Forum and the forthcoming COP28, all these big conferences and big issues, big agendas. But at the end of the day, we are still trapped in this national state, framework of thinking. So, right, because we have our own interest, like, party, we have our own people, we have different class, we have hierarchy. So all the things like determine that we couldn't get on certain kind of like consensus, even if we can build on some very basic understanding, like some framework.
Yes.
And something is bad, of course. Climate change is, doing harm to the people, and it's getting even more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the plan? What is the action? This is more to the core, like, because it requires sacrifice on economy, on recruitment, like on human labors, on whatsoever, tradings. It's all part of the globalization.
Yes.
But that means you have to sacrifice a piece of mind share, and this is where all the conflicts came from.
Yeah, because people don't want to make that sacrifice.
Of course. And the global south country, of course, why we need to sacrifice, because most of the pollutions, most of the carbon emission was caused by you, right? The developed countries.
That's a reasonable answer, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. But again, climate change is global, right? So there's no borderline. There's no, we can like limit the temperature within my regime, but not in yours.
Yes.
So not in my backyard, basically, is not gonna be valid anyways. So I didn't see the solution to any of this. Of course, I'm just a writer.
Yes.
But I think we need some fundamentally change on the mindset, and we need to set up some new agenda. So to think beyond that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm trying to think of a book. I can't remember the name of the book by Stanley
of
Robinson.
Course. The Administration of Future.
The Ministry of the Future.
Yeah.
That was something. I mean, he came up with an idea there.
Yeah. It's very optimistic.
You think it's optimistic?
Yeah.
He said he went for the global bankers.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who had no interest in specific countries, specific regions. They were working at a global level.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if we have global bankers.
I'm not sure.
Seems to me bankers tend to be of a bank, or of a government.
Yeah.
So you think he's an optimism about that?
Yes.
An optimist?
Yes. Of course, we need optimism.
I feel like you're an optimist too.
I am, from a different angle, I guess.
Yes?
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, maybe only the storytelling is what we can do to create the consensus. Yeah, for the next generation.
To make a story can make something much more real than a government talking about what you should do.
Yeah.
If stories can sort of pierce through people.
Yeah. So basically, human civilization, we built up upon storytelling, right? Since the caveman age.
Yes.
Yeah, without story, we couldn't make any consensus, basically. You have to tell the story about how the world was created, how human was created, and how we can communicate with each other. And that's all consensus. Yes.
You say here that in the age of globalization, there are no permanent winners. Whatever you've obtained, you'll lose someday.
Yeah.
And you'll have to pay it back with interest.
Of course.
That's what you're talking about, how you have to sacrifice something.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about like all this colony countries back in the day,
Yeah.
and what's happening now, and all this backfires, basically the payoff. Yeah. Here and there.
It sort of brings me to this next point I want to talk about. When you talk about, you often talk about inequality, and you talk about what you call invisible people. I think that's really a good way of talking about it. And of course, you have in Waist Tide, you have that very strongly, and you have it in other contactless love.
Mm-hmm.
In both cases, you have invisible people.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I always have strong compassion about, those who was basically invisible in our social interaction,
Mm-hmm.
but they're basically sacrificing a lot to support the infrastructure of the society,
Yes.
right? Like the waste workers.
Right. The waste workers, yes.
Yeah, basically without them, our cities like Paris
wouldn't
be exist.
Yeah.
Like think about the strike in UK.
Yes.
So all the trash on the street, nobody is taking care of them, and
Yes.
it's totally disaster.
Yes.
So but I think they didn't get treated fair enough. Of course, they didn't get like in the book, like insurance, healthcare, and even protection from the toxical environment.
Yes.
And all this, we can call it slow violence, because all this
slow violence.
Yeah,
yes.
The environmental issue basically is a process of maybe decades or centuries. So it's a very slow, long term of damagement.
Mm-hmm.
So to the water, to the soil, to the air, but also to the like transgenerational
Mm-hmm.
harms of people, right? So no matter it's like physically or mentally or even epigenetically, it's changing us. So a lot of trauma, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
mental
Mm-hmm.
issue, basically from pollution, from environmental damages. So it's causing a lot of personal mentality issue and diseases. So this is by research for real.
Yes.
So I think all of these people and the invisible class, not only in China but in India and elsewhere, is such a huge number of population.
Yeah.
But it was so hard to see, and there's so few of their story have been told. So this is what I'm concerned about. Like, if we couldn't see them, we couldn't understand them, we don't have the compassion to them, like how can we build a more equal system?
Yes.
So,
well, in Waist Tide, you really bring that out.
Yeah.
With strong characters. I mean, development that is strong about the different characters. You mentioned that you're writing a sequel
Yes.
to Waist Tide.
Yes.
Are you able to talk about that a little bit, or is it?
Yeah, it's on another island. I've just talked to Patrick. I'm an islandic person because I was born and raised like very close to seashore, and islandic experience, it was part of my childhood.
Yes.
So I'm always, kind of like be fascinating by all these islands. So the new book will again happen on the other island, but it's an artificial island.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something like a hopeful future, like a blueprint of society to fighting against the climate change. But again, they're also invisible.
I was just going to ask you if they're invisible people.
Of course, that's the key message there. All this, like too good to be true solution, there must be some kind of sacrifice behind the curtain, and people not necessary to see that in a way. but the story is about how to reveal that part of the truth, and how can we think beyond that to make the real change happening. I have a different kind of imagination with Stanley Robinson's solution. It might be a little bit, surreal and spiritual.
Yours.
Yeah, my version of the solution.
Yes.
But yeah, it's also with AI and non-human, human kind of triangle intelligence, how we can work together and to build a new kind of, ecosystem.
Oh, that sounds really like a powerful message.
It's very difficult to write, to be honest, because after the ChatGPT moment, I took a pause because I have to rethink about everything about AI. So you don't want to be like when readers read your description about AI, they think it's dated. Yeah, they think, oh, ChatGPT can do a better job than your character. So I have to rethink a lot of things about how to imagine the future of AI in a different way, and how to put it down into storytelling in a different kind of style. Because I think maybe we should get rid of those too tech savvy, too info dumb, too many explanation of what is happening, what is the technology behind the scene, but put it in a more mythological way. So yeah, but it's super difficult. So still struggling with it.
What sort of time frame are you thinking of?
I think, again, also like with time, we put it in 2020 something, because it was put it as like 250 years anniversary of United States. So it's like 2026 or something. So this might be 5 or 10 years later than that.
Right.
Yeah, but again, it's alternative history, so it could be any time, but it's totally different timeline. So the world is different, the technology is different, but maybe there'll be some interconnection with the reality. We never know.
Well, I can hardly wait to read it.
I wish I can finish it.
Are you writing it in Chinese?
Yes.
So there'll be a translation period.
Yeah.
Have to wait even longer.
Yeah. But hopefully this time we can take a shorter time to get it done.
Well, because you're better known now, so that should make a difference.
Yeah.
You should have publishers fighting to have the rights to publish your book.
I hope, and the publisher here, Paris, they'd love to have the second book, because the first one doing very well in France. So I'm very happy to know that. Yeah.
So that's been translated into French then.
Yeah, maybe we can do it like simultaneously.
Yes, that would be interesting.
Yeah, because in the first one they need to read in English. Then other languages they will follow. This is the rule, right? Back in the day.
Yeah.
But now maybe not necessary, because
as the author, you ought to be able to request simultaneous translation in a certain number of countries.
Yeah, and I think the maybe the key issue is, can we find a qualified Chinese translator? In French, in French, we have no problem. Grenell is
I saw that on the
he's the best.
Yeah,
he's the best. Like both languages, like native, so we have no problem on that. But not other markets. Like some are very difficult to find a good Chinese translator.
All right.
Yeah.
The last sort of big picture thing I'd like to talk to you about is that a lot of your characters have a limited view of the world.
Yeah.
And they don't, we've sort of covered that briefly in different things we've said just now, but that people are just focused in too much on a limited view of the world. And you talk about, how shall I say it, that we need to find ways of expanding our views. That's very clear in Waste Tide when that happens.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know how you think we can expand our views. Does that come back to storytelling again, do you think?
Now it feels like contradictory, like we use all this technology, try to expand our view of the world, but basically we're narrowing down to, echo chambers, something like that, just repeating same
echo chamber, just
yeah
same thing going around,
and everything was recommended by algorithm. They just guessing what you love to read and just feed you what you love to read, and just like self-enhancement is totally wrong. So in my opinion, so I mean, we need to create this diverse, inclusive environment for information, right? That basically from far left to far right, you have the spectrum of different opinions on certain occasions. So you can see how these narratives be shifted from far left to far right, or even different angles. And you can see how this information and angles be manipulated, and people can realize, what I saw just a little slide of the reality, and it can be easily shifted just by a little bit of wording or phrasing changed. So I think this is so crucial, and basically I think we need a new framework or new infrastructure of information flow, because all of our social media basically right now just running to create that kind of echo chamber. So we have to break through all of those wars, and not to mention wars between countries, between ideologies, and between different beliefs. So this is where all these problems came from, right? We basically just see what we believe. And this is not expanding. This is just self-enhancement.
You say we need a new framework. How can we get that?
Actually, there's some people doing the thing.
Like what?
Mark Stegmaier from MIT. He's the physics. He had this project like basically using AI, machine learning, to help people. You can switch the spectrum politically to see one news, then you can see the different version of it. And that's very interesting. That's the starting point of doing so. So imagine if we can have this. Of course, it's very difficult, because considering the value of different media and different culture for sure, it's very difficult to deploy it in a massive way. But if we have that kind of platform, allows people to can have diverse and inclusive perspective of same reality. I mean, so maybe that's a possible gateway towards a more open future.
Will it happen?
I don't know. Maybe people's mind got messed up. Could be, and because everything is so relatively, different, and I don't know. Yeah, because we are talking about alignment issue on AI. But what I mean is basically human, ourselves, we're not necessarily aligned to each other, right? Yeah, within EU, basically there are a lot of like misalignment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
a lot.
Yeah, a lot. So I don't see this happen.
At the Peace Forum.
At the Peace Forum.
What takeaways did you have from the Peace Forum?
Yeah, I had this great conversation with all these big shots from Microsoft, from Meta, Jan LeCun, from UNESCO, Gabriela, and Ian Bremmer, geopolitics, in Columbia University. He is so active on X, and I think there are very intensive argument on the stage, and you can see all these different position and perspective on AI regulation and policy making, everything. So I think, of course, they are all legit in a way. So because from their perspective, from their vision, is of course is correct. But I also feel that we're just at the very beginning of the paradigm shift. So as I put it, like we're already living in singularity. It's not just a single spot in time, but it's a period of transition. Like maybe it's a century of singularity, but maybe afterward, when we look back into history, we just realize, oh, that happened already there. We just didn't realize it. We just didn't recognize it in that way.
Because we were living it.
Yes, basically it. So people living in the, big times, they didn't realize it, right? So a lot of assumption was made afterward and by the historians. And I think right now we're in that paradigm shifting moment. And all of those arguments, battlings will be a very extremely interesting part of the history. And basically, I'm the one who observing all of those, people. And I think I would love to have them in my stories because this is so real, this is so lively, and this is something I really love to represent the different, even fragmented reality in understanding AI. So, but I think what's more important is right now we just have the conference, the declaration in UK, like all these big players, they have agreed on something on the regulation framework internationally. So we can foresee it coming that AI might be the thing that can reunite us, human, as a species, as a civilization, together. So this is so important because always in history, when you look back in time, we need some false enemy, right? Right now, we need something so distinguishable, distinguished from human. So the others, they are so different from our own kind. But this is what threatening us. Maybe it's not for real, but we need that kind of thing. We need that kind of external crisis to push us to think, to act, to unite it as one again. So maybe this is in Chinese, crisis can be translated into two characters. One is wei, is crisis, and another is ji. It means opportunity or chance. So in Chinese, wei ji, crisis always means two part of the reality.
Wow.
So it's very deeply embedded in our nature. Like we see one crisis, or again, it's an opportunity to save us.
The name of my website that your podcast is going to appear on is called Imaginize.World. What would you, just in a sentence or two, say if someone said to you, if I say to you, how do you imaginize the world?
There's one sentence in the book AI 2041 is
Yes.
like to create the future we want to live.
Yes.
How to say the word?
I have it. I have your quote here.
Yeah.
A wonderful quote, and I have part of it on the top of my webpage and my X page with your name. I gave you credit
Oh,
for
thank
it.
you.
Yeah. By imagining the future through science fiction, we can step in, make change, and actively play a role in shaping our reality.
Yeah.
In other words, with every future, we wish to create,
yes,
we must first learn to imagine it.
yes, that's the quote. So I mean, imaginize the world is something not taken for granted. You have to learn it first. So imagination is not, of course, is intrinsically in our human nature, but it's not naturally everyone knows how to imagine in a very, I'll say in a very personal way. I'll say you have to use your human parts, like your embodied experience, your childhood memory, even your family history, and your intrinsic responses of the surroundings, like the emotions, even those reaction beyond languages. I think those are the most important part, even those you couldn't fully recognize and understand yet, but is more important that, like for example, your dreams, and those part like subconsciously or even like non-consciously is basically the core of imagination. So imagination is not driven by logic or reasoning. It's driven by something even more deeper than we can understand. So I think you need to train how you, just like a vessel, just like all this data's information getting through you and through your interface, they might have some instant reactions, just like a melting pot. It's like some alchemy, processing. So some gold, some diamond, some crystal, something might emerge from there, and you never know what it is. That's the beauty of imagination.
Well, that's a great answer to my question.
Thank you.
It's been really wonderful talking with you,
The
Stan.
pleasure was mine.
We've covered a lot of things and very deep and very, very interesting. I want to really, really thank you for this conversation.